tell us, who you are and how you got to know Johnny J.
So my name is Joe. Originally from Canada, Halifax. Grew up here, essentially had dual citizenship to the United States. So I bounced around Florida, Virginia, quite a bit. Had family in Florida, family in Virginia. And basically grew up listening to Tupac. First album I heard was Me Against the World. Playing basketball with some friends. That just kind of grew from there. I remember actually getting the double CD. When CDs were still around, and getting actually the double dual CD that was like as thick as a book, and going through the book and trying to figure out essentially who the producers were on the album. And as I grew older, and I looked more into the book, into the actual linear notes, I just kept seeing this name Johnny J come up, but yet, he wasn't in the spotlight, so I didn't really know who he was. So I kept doing research online, and at that time there really wasn't too much information. So I let some years pass because he was always my favorite producer for Tupac. And back in the day, probably around, to do a little time jump, probably around 2007 or 2006 actually was the first time I made contact with him, just asked him some questions, and he got back to me right away. That's actually not true, sorry. His manager at the time, I can't remember the guy's name, got back to me first. And then at that time, I was part of a forum, and it was like dedicated to Tupac, and essentially we came up with the idea I came up with the idea essentially to do a Johnny J interview because there hadn't been one done in a long time. And basically the state of affairs, as every Tupac fan knows, is that at that time they had released posthumous albums that were not featuring even Johnny J remixes or anything Johnny J related. At that time, I think Loyal to the Game had come out, and even Better Days to an extent had a lot of stuff that wasn't necessarily filling to Tupac. So what I really wanted to do was figure out what my favorite, why my favorite producer wasn't on the albums. So I reached out to him on Facebook, essentially asked him for an interview. I was working at the time at a mortgage brokerage, and my phone rang. It was a California number, and lo and behold, on the other end of the phone was Johnny J. And I freaked out and got up and thought it was a joke at first. I told my boss or supervisor, whatever, I got to go outside. And just basically got outside and started talking to him, and it's just like I knew him from day one. Just the friendliest, most approachable guy that I think I've ever talked to, especially with the status of, stardom that he had achieved and the people he had been around, greatness-wise. But, he didn't ever treat you strangely or, like he showed a lot of love at that point. And that's basically how the interview initially was engaged.
And so you then talked to him and said, hey, let's schedule something?
Exactly, yes. So what had happened is, obviously, at that time, there was a lot of people who, were in the whole Tupac was dead, Tupac was still alive theory. So he kind of screened some of the questions, obviously, because he didn't want to talk about any of that stuff, He thought it was nonsense. And he just didn't really want to touch on it. Of course, there may be one question pertaining to that, just to kind of debunk it at the time. A lot of the questions were more geared towards essentially why he wasn't on the albums, what had happened, and why particularly they were choosing, particularly Amaru at the time, were choosing other producers to do remixes on Tupac's material, which was a complete insult to the fans who had been there since the beginning. beginning, and didn't really understand why Eminem and all these other guys were producing these projects who really didn't have any business touching it, you know. I mean, I can understand one remix, but not in the whole album, you know. Like
Yeah.
Johnny J was like, he was like Quincy Jones to Michael Jackson, you know. It was that same camaraderie, and the music just worked. So I can remember even just friends of mine being so pissed off that he wasn't being included on the albums, and for trying to figure out why. Like, why are they doing this? And that was really kind of the beginning of the end of Tupac's posthumous material. And then they did Pac's Life. I think it was on at the same time. Pac's Life really sealed the deal because it was all remixes, and they had, like, you know, all these different, you know, what Johnny used to call flavor of the month, and it's exactly what it was, to try to sell the albums when they had the fan base there, and, you know, they weren't even using the fan base. They were just trying to, you know, maybe catch a new audience or do what was hot, you know, and I don't know what happened there, but from my understanding, it was whoever was out of Maru who was dealing with the musical direction had decided that they were not going to supplement his remixes into the actual material, even though he had submitted remixes, which I think a lot of people have heard most of them now. They've leaked online, which was actually going to be the All Eyes on Us project, excuse me. A lot of those remixes were going to be put onto Better Days and Until the End of Time, and some newer stuff as well that he had worked on.
And so give us a sense of who you think Johnny J is from all the times you talked to him. And maybe go into that. How many times did you talk to him?
Johnny J was the type of guy that I think he had a huge heart, like, for people and his fans. He was really a workaholic, and I think you've met Tupac's match. I think those guys were definitely made to be together with each other as far as the work ethic. I mean, because he was doing like 5-6 beats a day, from what he told me, and Tupac was writing 5-6 songs a day. So it was like the perfect match, you know. He always talked about producers taking, you know, years or months to make beats or complete beats or whatever, and he just wasn't with that. He was with, you know, the whole let's get it done, it happens in the spur of the moment type situation. Johnny J, to me too as well, though, never really put himself in the spotlight. It was never about, you know, him being some front of the Vibe magazine or whatever magazine was back then. It was always about music, strictly. And I think you can clearly hear that, opposed to a lot of the other producers that were particularly involved in these projects. And, you know, with that is where you got the real deal. And I think that also was a perfect combination with, you know, Tupac as well. Definitely, for sure.
Yeah. So how many times did you talk to him?
I've talked to Johnny J probably every couple days after we started doing the interview. And I would either call him or he would call me, in particular, and we would just kind of chat about what was going on, or, you know, what he was doing musically. And at that time, he was working with Tatiana Ali, who was the daughter in Fresh Prince, and he was really excited about that project. And he had played me some of that project. That project was amazing, and I really wish the fans could have heard that project because it was strictly R&B, and he was kind of going in that direction, and he was just really pushing that at that time. There was a couple other instances too where I caught him in the studio when Little Easy was making Letter to My Homeboys. I actually talked to him while he was doing that beat, and putting that down with him. That's another amazing song I suggest everybody to go out there and listen to. He was also talking about working with Little Easy's crew and getting together, particularly something at that time as well. A lot of the conversations pertain to basically just him working with Tupac, and there was a lot of great information shared as far as particularly what had happened in those sessions. Like, for instance, one of the questions I had asked him was, the classic All About You. I said, well, why was Snoop at the end of the song just talking? Was he supposed to be rapping on that? He was like, no, he just kind of, came in and talked some shit. But, the great story about that song, and this is a real testament to Johnny J's, production style, is All About You was done in one pass. So, for instance, he had the drums synced, ready to go. He played the drums live on an SP1200 drum machine with the musicians in one pass, and it was done. That was all done live. The keyboards, guitar, bass, hip-hop, that's not an ordinary thing. That's why it has such a live feel to it.
Yeah.
Opposed to, being very stagnant, right? I always thought that was amazing. There's quite a few other songs too as well. There was a lot of musicians at Death Row that were super talented. Ricky Rouse definitely is one of them, as well as quite a few other people that were particularly working there. I can't remember the guy's other name, the bass player that used to come in, Cornell Limbs or something like that. Did a lot of the bass work and stuff like that on that particular project as well. A good bit of information is, I think people should hear this, and Johnny J told me this directly from his mouth, is that when he was producing for Tupac on All Eyes on Me, this is something that he shared with me, everybody thought Dr. Dre was in there doing the beats. Okay? So, for instance, when they would hear it, they'd be in the studio and they wouldn't be directly in the studio seeing Johnny J produce a track. They thought it was a Dre track. And I always felt that he kind of felt that Dre took his shine a bit in that way because, Dre was Death Row, but he came in and basically saved the whole thing. But an example of that is he told me that he was working on a project, or a beat, I should say, and about 5 minutes later, he heard his bass line repeated down the hallway. So they were stealing his ideas. And he went and talked to Sugar, yes, and it got all sorted out. But just interesting to know, if they were actually copying him and the stuff that he was doing at that time, and you had the hottest producers done. I don't know exactly what producer it was, but somebody was trying to, steal his bass lines and things like that because he would come up with all the original bass lines and things like that, right? Pretty interesting stuff.
Wow.
Yeah.
What are your favorite Tupac songs?
Tupac songs, that's a hard one, man. Shorty Wanna Be a Thug, that beat, and just even the lyrics, like, that's, to me, quintessential Johnny J. Troublesome, 96, I think it's amazing. Life Goes On, of course. Pour Out a Little Liquor. Even Death Around the Corner. I mean, just anything that Johnny J kind of did, I guess, would be in the realm. It's hard to pick just one, because they all have their own little thing to them, like, you can't really just say, oh, this is my favorite, because, even Checkout Time, that, like, that's another great one, and a lot of people don't know that too was I think it was the last song done on that album. They had been down in Vegas, and they basically, Pac was the type of dude that would write songs from his experiences, and they had an experience in Vegas. They got back, Johnny dropped the beat, and that was like the last song they put on that album, was Checkout Time.
So
One of my favorites.
writing like 5 songs a day, and then 5 beats a day. I mean, that album probably went pretty quick.
2 weeks. Johnny told me.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, maybe not 2 weeks produced, or I should say mixed and all that stuff like that, right? Like, things drag out. But the stuff that Johnny J did, I think a lot of the stuff that he had, from my understanding, was already done. A lot of the beats. Because what had happened is, when Tupac signed with Death Row, obviously we all know the story that, he first got in with Daz and started doing that stuff. But then he called Johnny J, and Johnny J thought it was a joke that Tupac was out of prison. And he's like, I need you down at Death Row. I need you to come down. I got my new album coming out. You got beats. And Johnny J was just sitting there for a long time because Tupac was in prison, not doing anything. Well, I shouldn't say not doing anything. He was making beats is what he was doing. He was getting ready. So when he said when he first got into, Death Row and started working with Tupac, he just started dumping beats. And I asked him how that process works. This is interesting to, I think, any producer or Tupac fan, that's into the type of music aspect of it all, right? So what would happen is he'd pull out his floppy disk, because it was, the SP1200 was all floppy disk, right? That's technology back then. And he'd pop his beats in, and then Tupac would say, I want that one, I'll pass on that one, I pass on that one, and they keep writing and writing and writing. And I think what happened is, as well with some of the unreleased material, particularly stuff that people say they've heard, but they haven't heard, and I know they haven't heard it, even though they say that everything's leaked. I'm telling you right now, that's not the truth. There's still music out there that's not been heard. A lot of the stuff was not completed because they would, they'd be writing so fast and going so fast, they complete one song, but then they'd skip over another if they didn't kind of like it, So
yeah.
A lot of stuff is still there. Like, this is clear, from a direct source that the 30 songs that he referred to in the interview are not All Eyes on Us and the tracks that are leaked online, because the person who told me this is very aware of the tracks that leaked online, as well as the All Eyes on Us stuff. It's not that stuff. It's 30 brand new tracks that we have never heard. So those are still in the vault.
Wow.
Which I've heard every single one of them.
And how do
I
these
wish I would have recorded them.
how do these tracks compare to, the other Johnny J tracks?
From my memory,
Yeah.
just from hearing them over the phone one time, it was so overwhelming to hear that stuff. Because as a Tupac fan, it's like your dream. I mean, to hear that music, especially Johnny J stuff, equally comparable to anything that was done. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it was, the real deal, old school, 96, 97 Johnny J in the flesh, and then people will ask me names and titles, but I can't give names and titles because I only heard the songs one time. I don't know what they were, but I'm telling you right now, I've heard all these new remixes as well from my own perspective, and the stuff that's leaked. I'm telling you right now, I heard stuff. All those tracks that I heard, particularly, were not released to the public yet. I don't care. Anybody can dispute that all day long they want. And a guy got a hard drive. Well, we all know who that was, and that's fine. But I'm telling you right now, this stuff is not out there.
Wow. So you're probably a good person.
Mind-blowing stuff.
Go ahead.
Sorry?
Go ahead.
I didn't cut you off there. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, you're probably a good person to ask this. Okay? There were 11 albums that were released, 11 Tupac albums, right? I mean, I think it was like,
so, yeah.
I think it was 6 studio albums and 5 compilations, right?
Yeah, so it's around there. I couldn't give you an exact figure. I never really went and counted, but I'm pretty sure, yes, you're probably accurate on that.
Okay, so Tell me what you think Tupac would have been able to accomplish, let's say, had he lived till he was 50 or 60 years old. How many albums would he have released in his lifetime, and how do you think those albums would have done?
My perspective is very biased. And the reason I say this is because I truly believe that, and this isn't even coming from like what they want to call a fanboy perspective. It's just coming from, my personal creating music, doing music, making music, listening to music perspective. So, in my opinion, I think Tupac would still be around, but as we've heard, kind of the myths and stories is that Tupac kind of wanted to take a back seat and be more of an executive type figure as far as producing groups like the Outlaws and different people. I definitely think he would have made albums, but I think they would have been a little more scarce than what he was doing at that time because he was a superstar. I think it was going to take time, but I'm one to believe that, which a lot of people don't, that he was going to make Machiavelli records. I do not think, it could have been possibly distributed by Death Row, but I think he was trying to be his own record executive and follow that path and also get more into acting and things like that. I think the albums would have been less and less as the years go on, but I think the material would have been as strong. But I also don't think that, I think his impact on hip-hop was so strong that if he would have survived, I don't think hip-hop would be in the same position it is today. Like, a lot of the stuff that's out there now wouldn't even be accepted. It just never would have made it whatsoever. It wouldn't even be around.
So Dre is worth $1 billion. Do you think that Tupac would be worth $1 billion today had he lived?
Yes, absolutely.
More or?
Absolutely. I don't know about more, but I mean, depending on, because the whole Dre thing was kind of, that Beats is what got him there,
Yeah.
It was the Beats deal, right? I mean, Tupac maybe could have come up with something that was kind of similar, but he was more of a rapper. I don't know if he would have been in the billions, but yeah, he definitely would have been a super wealthy man. Absolutely. He would have been a multi-millionaire like all these rappers today. But I'm telling you right now, all these rappers today wouldn't be even really around. There's no, in my opinion, there's really nobody can compete with that guy. I mean, he was when he put something out, it was quality. Everything that he did, there was no filler. It was just straight quality, and a really good testament to that. And this is nothing against Johnny J, but even the 7 Day Theory album, you could see the evolution happening. I mean, that album to me is like, that's not even hip hop. That's something else. Like, it's his own, he's so magnificent. It's his own form of music. I don't know what you want to call it, but it was almost like its own genre. That's how far it transcended it. Just the things he's talking about lyrically are absolutely mind-blowing on that particular album. And I think a lot of people, if you actually look at the fine print, read between the lines, he was kind of giving little hints on little things,
Yeah. And what about Biggie? Do you think Biggie would have been a billionaire?
No. I think it would have been much similar to the situation with Tupac. From my understanding, I'm not as big a Biggie fan as I am Tupac, but Biggie was trying to do the same thing. He was trying to get more into the executive role, as far as producing his own artists from Brooklyn and things like that. I think he would have followed the same path, but I think I really do. This is one thing I feel very strongly about. I think if Tupac would have lived and Biggie would have lived, they would have made up. They would have got back together. And we know this because Tupac was trying to do One Nation. And the whole One Nation thing, he got ducked down to come to L.A., who were East Coast artists from Brooklyn, New York. And he was trying to unify. I really think that Tupac would have got together with Nas. He would have got together with Biggie again. I think that all would have been mended. in my personal opinion, because I think really the big issue in this situation was Puff. You know what I mean? I think he was really the one trying to not let that happen, you know, because why, I don't know. But I really think that relationship would have been mended if they would have got down, sat together, and actually had a good conversation between those two dudes. Just because Tupac knew he was great from the beginning. I mean, he put him on. I mean, why would he, I think he just felt betrayed by him thinking that he knew originally in the beginning who shot him in the beginning. But I don't really think, in my opinion, Biggie really knew it was going to happen. Did he know who shot him after the fact? I think he did, and I think he should have told him. But at the same time, he's putting his own self at risk by doing that, because I think the cats that hit Tupac were serious dudes, and they weren't playing. So I don't think Biggie, being from New York, wanted to really get into that position. Now, is that a good move from a friend? No. And I think that's why Tupac was so pissed off about that situation. And rightfully so,
So tell everybody what One Nation was.
From my understanding, from the information that I've gathered, Tupac wanted to basically get together all the artists, basically, that he liked from around the way and unify the whole thing. He wanted to kill the East-West thing. So Scarface was going to be on there. They also had Duck Down coming through. There's rumored DJ Premier was supposed to be on there. Obviously, massive producer, East Coast, did a lot of Biggie, Nas, Busta Rhymes, one of my favorites as well from the East Coast, was on there as well. Bone Thugs and Harmony. I think it was more of a unification thing to kind of unify East and West. But then you kind of have alternative theories on that too, with the Biggie thing, because you have people, and even Tupac kind of saying that he was doing it because he wanted to shut the whole thing down. But then you hear stories about Eric B. being with Death Row East and, trying to squash the whole thing, but then Diddy not wanting to do it and create conflict there. Would Biggie have been on that album? I don't think so. But I think it would have been a step in the right direction to get these guys all together to, stop the stupidness between the East and the West, for sure. Who knows what would have happened, But I know there would have been a lot more features if he would have lived, because that was supposed to be the next project. After 7-Day Theory or 3-Day Theory, whatever you want to call it. I think that would have been... That album is very incomplete, I think. There's things that they were going to be on there. There's artists he wanted to work with that never got to work with that would have been on there. And from my understanding, Nas and him were going to meet at House of Blues in Vegas and squash the situation. If those two dudes would have got together, man, forget about it, man. It would have been over.
Yeah.
And that would have been something. Two of my favorites right there.
So getting
those two dudes together.
Yeah, no, that would have been something. Get into the Johnny J thing, kind of back to him. What happened with him and Death Row, and what do you know about the money situation with him?
From my understanding, just to kind of start off, what happened is Johnny J told me that he started feeling his exact verbatim words is fickle and funny. Something didn't feel right in the air. Now, when I think about that in context of what he's talking about, I think what he means is a lot of the bullshit that we hear about, people getting their ass whooped, distractions, too many people in the studio. And I think as a producer, okay, it was really weighing on him, and it was messing with his workflow. And I think he was really had enough of it. Now, he said they never had a fallout. I don't know if that's what happened. I really don't. I don't know if I believe that. And the reason I say that is maybe it wasn't a fallout, but there's definitely something that happened that was preventing him from going back to that studio. And how tight he was with Tupac, I don't know. It's just something doesn't seem right there. He was working, he did all this music, and then gone, you know? Just, it's very strange how that transpired that way.
Yeah.
I think maybe Tupac wanted to probably to come down, and he really wasn't with it, and that's probably what happened, I think. That's nothing against Johnny J, because I can understand where he's coming from. I wouldn't want to be in that environment either as a producer, because it's, you know, you have to focus when you're making beats or producing tracks. You got to be a full 100% focus, or your music can get affected, etc. Right? Payment, from my understanding, the research I've done, he had to sue Death Row in '97, and there was a $10,000 advance on each track and 3% royalty. I don't know if Johnny was paid. I don't think he was, because of the bankruptcy situation with Death Row. I think it dragged out. From what I've heard, you know, there was numerous death threats to him. When he did sue Death Row, and directly from his wife, he had to wear a vest. So that kind of tells you the situation that was going on there. He didn't want to be fucking with Death Row's money. And I think they felt that who's this, guy that, has come in and produced Tupac, and now he thinks he gets all his money. They weren't even paying their own artists, so why are they going to pay some outside producer? And he wasn't even signed to Death Row either. He was independent, so that's another thing as well. But he was brave to do it, and I think he was, just to do it. And I think if Tupac was alive, I think, Tupac probably would have went in the same kind of situation. I mean, if we look at the accounting of his money, I mean, at the end of it, it's insane. Like, how many albums he sold, and then what was in his bank account? Like $60,000, something like that?
Well, I thought it was 6,000, but...
Was it 6,000? Yeah, it was lower than that.
It was $6,000, and he sold...
ridiculous, yeah.
He sold like $250 million of record albums while he was alive.
Yeah, and if you think about Johnny J, too, and you put that in perspective, think about how much he was supposed to be owed at that time. If he had a 3% advance and $10,000 per track, he was owed a lot of money even at that time as well.
And by 97, when Johnny J sued, Suge was in jail at that time. He was in jail from, October 22nd of 96, and then shortly before the Biggie Smalls killing, his sentencing happened, but he was still down in Los Angeles awaiting transport to Mule Creek, I think is where he went. And so he was in jail at the time. So, that lawsuit happened when Suge was away.
Days away.
Yeah.
So that was directly to do with, was it Reggie who was running the label at that time?
Yeah, Reggie was running the label after Mule Creek. Once Suge went to Mule Creek, then Reggie gets installed and runs the record label, is my understanding. So it would have been around that same time period? I think so. I mean, we'll have to look up the lawsuit and see when the lawsuit got filed. But, it seems like there's a lot of death threats around Death Row. Yeah. I mean, we never really touched on that too much, but, from what I understand, basically, as I said, that relationship became devoured because of that situation. However, though, I was told by Johnny J that probably about a month before Tupac was shot, Tupac called Johnny J, and he wanted him back. Okay? And a lot of people may not know this.
personal phone call from Tupac, and he was, at the time, he was working with Big Psych on Big Psych's solo album, and Tupac personally called him and asked him to come back. Okay, so people want to say, Tupac was looking for a new sound on Machiavelli. Cool, that's true. Maybe he was for that particular album, but he still wanted Johnny J back in the picture. Because if he didn't, why did he make that phone call? They were going to get together and do some more music. That would have continued forever. That never would have stopped, because they were going to make that non-stop productions and keep that rolling as well. Because I think Tupac understood the essence of Johnny J. He obviously did, that he was a pure music dude, and that would have continued as well. People think, oh, Johnny J never would have been back in the fold. Yeah, right. That's why Tupac called him personally and asked him to come back. Can you see Tupac doing that with any other producer?
Wow.
An example of that, is that all the other people that were with him back in the day. There's nothing against these guys, but, he wasn't calling them to come back. And I think it was that relationship. That was a match made in heaven right there. Those two dudes.
Yeah, and you can hear it from the music.
Perfect. Exactly. That's why that stuff is so magical. People say, "Oh, it's just the Tupac." It's just Tupac on there. No, it's the combination of it's the great beats that were put down in the lyrics.
Yeah.
For instance, "All Eyes on Me" carries a feeling about that song. "All Eyes on Me," the title track. That song has a vibe to it. Like all the great music that we've ever heard, whether it be from the 60s, 70s, 50s, whatever, it has a certain feeling to it. That whole album. And that's the essence of greatness. All the great albums have that. Dark Side of the Moon, whatever you want to take, rock music, whatever, Dark Side of the Moon, Electric Ladyland, they all have a certain vibe. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like a special, feeling to the music. It makes you feel a certain way. And you can feel a lot of what Tupac was going through that time through that album. Even that album itself is monumental. Not only from a music standpoint, mixing standpoint, but also a lyrical standpoint. He came out of there spitting fire,
Yeah.
And whoever, these East Coast dudes that heard that shit were, Tupac's with Death Row? Oh, no. That's like putting a match, on gasoline,
Yeah.
with a bunch of bombs attached to it. So, it's kind of interesting how that all happened.
So tell us about your last conversation with Johnny J, and when was that, kind of how close was it to his death?
Would have been March of 2008. And I had actually lost contact with him, and the reason I had lost contact with him was because he had gotten DWI or DUI or whatever you want to call it. I don't know what the exact term in California is.
Yeah, it's DUI down here.
DUI, okay. That was around the last time I talked to him, and then he basically went silent for 4 months. Wasn't hearing much, couldn't get through to him, was hitting voicemail. I was just thinking, no, I don't know what's going on here. And I was online going through YouTube videos, and I saw this comment where some kid had made, I don't know who this guy was and how he knew this, but he had said something about Johnny J was arrested for a DUI and he's about to get, put in prison, whatever. So I called him up and left a message on his voicemail. And he did return my call. He returned my call and let me know kind of what was going on, but he didn't go too much detail, particularly about that situation. That would have been the last time I talked to him. Was then, yeah. It's like March. Yeah, it's March 2008.
And what do you know about the circumstances of his death?
Well, I got the phone call. directly from his wife. Okay? That same day. I mean, this probably was 4 hours later. You know, she called me directly. She said he's gone. I was like, he's gone? What do you mean he's gone? He's dead, Joe. He's gone. I said, what happened? It was like he killed himself in prison. Jumped off the tier. I said, what? Jumped off? He killed himself? I mean, it's just when you hear something like that, I couldn't believe it. Like, I was like, what? This doesn't make any sense, you know? It's just like I couldn't wrap my head around it, you know? Like, why would he kill himself? It didn't make sense to me. It really, like, I felt sick, you know, when I heard that. I just felt absolutely disgusted and sick, you know? Because we lost a legend, but we also, you know, the thing that was also in the cards too was getting Johnny J back onto Tupac projects, and now that was impossible because now he's dead. So you're never going to hear that again. That's over. It's done, right? But then it's also the aspect of the friendship that I had with the man. It was, you know, a friend as a friend too, you know, and thinking about his family, you know, and what they were going through at that time. It just was the oddest, strangest thing that I think I've ever experienced in my life, you know, and I was sick for months upon months upon months about the whole situation. It really sent me in a downspin, big time.
Wow.
You know?
Yeah, of course.
It just, even to think about it today, I mean, it blows my mind.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I just can't see how somebody so full of life could, you know, get that to that point. And I mean, he was going to be released in 2 months. You know?
Did you ever know
you
him as somebody that was depressed?
No, not at all.
Do you
Not
believe?
whatsoever.
Do you believe that he committed suicide?
No, it is not.
Have you heard anything surrounding the circumstances?
I heard many altering theories. I heard that he was extorted from the Mexican mafia, and you know, there was a situation that happened there, and he was asking for money to, you know, pay these dudes off, and he didn't. And that's what happened. And I've heard other stories about the prison guards. He got in a fight with a prison guard. He shouldn't have been in general population. He should have been, you know, protective kind of custody, because I guess that's where most of the celebrities go. But he had mouthed off to a security guard. See, that doesn't make any sense to me either, because Johnny J wasn't that type of dude. Like, he was a very respectful man, so I couldn't see him doing something like that. I don't believe that either. Right? So I think there was a reason they put him in general pop, you know, and he was definitely murdered. There's no doubt about it. You know, and that's the way I feel. I really truly feel that way. And I think that's too when I heard the news, I knew it wasn't right. You know what I mean? That he had committed suicide. Yeah, right. I didn't believe. Like, I knew that was not what had happened. So, like, you know, you know when you hear certain things about certain people and it just doesn't seem right. Well, that was one of those scenarios. It did not feel right. It felt wrong. You know what I'm saying? It did not feel right whatsoever.
Yeah.
It just didn't make any sense. Depressed? No, I wasn't Johnny J at all, whatsoever. You know, I mean, I wasn't by his side every single moment, but every conversation that I ever had with him, you know, it was good. Was he upset, you know, and maybe a little down about not being on Tupac projects anymore? Absolutely. That's his bread and butter and his man right there. And, you know, they're taking food off his table for his family. So, yeah, maybe that was a little bit, but to kill yourself? No, man, it wasn't to that point. You know, I mean, I can't speak for what he was, you know, particularly going through, but I don't believe, no, I truly don't believe he killed himself. at all.
Wow. Do you have one last, story about Johnny J that, how you would want him remembered from the fans?
I'll say to anybody is that from all the people that I've ever met in the industry, Johnny J was the most appreciative person for his fans ever. And he treated you as an equal. And he thanked you. He thanked me many times. He's like, Joe, thank you. I love you. Because if you wouldn't have supported my music, I wouldn't have been able to do this. I mean, how many people do you have or know that are in that status that think that way? And that's how he thought. And that was his whole perspective about his fans. At the same time, though, that, Johnny J was the type of dude you could tell, though, he wasn't phony, okay? So, if you were his fan and you weren't really getting along with him personally, he would let you know. You know what I'm saying? If you weren't cool with him, you know what I mean? Because if you listen to a lot of those older interviews, he wasn't doing anybody's name shouting out. He wasn't saying, "Hey Joe," like he did on my interview 100 times. You don't say somebody's name on an interview, unless you actually like that person. And that's even in human psychology in general. If you say somebody's name when you're talking to them, that's typically a sign that, you're cool with that person, right? But these other interviews were stagnant and very direct, choppy, and, there was no personalization there. And I really think for him to give me that opportunity to do that particular interview was absolutely mind-blowing, a blessing. It'll never leave me. But one particular story I'll give you about Johnny J is this, okay? So I got home from work one day, was just chilling, doing whatever, and I get a phone call. It's Johnny. He's on the phone with Tatiana Ali. Okay? Now, this is the type of dude he was. He was so thoughtful to his fan, or was me as, his fan, that he got her on the phone just to talk. You know what I'm saying? Just to talk about the album and what was going on. And I talked to the girl from the Fresh Prince, man. It was crazy. I was like, what is going on here? But see, that's the type of dude he was, right?
Wow.
And we basically chopped it up and broke it down, and she was kind of talking about what was going on with her, and they obviously were working in the studio at the time. But that's the type of dude he was. Like, he'd call you up like that, you know what I mean? As a fan, like, he didn't have to do that, you know what I'm saying? And that's the type of dude he was. He was just a funny, super big-hearted, lovable dude that legacy absolutely needs to fucking continue, and it makes me sick every day that I see things, with his music not being as out there and people not knowing what he did. Bothers me really bad because he was such a fucking legend in this game, and people don't even understand it. He's so underrated. And on top of all that, he was a good human being. He was a good person. He was a family man. He cared for people. He wasn't a piece of shit. He was a good dude. And that's what really bothers me about this whole thing with, the whole, did he commit suicide? Was he murdered? He was murdered, you know what I'm saying? And that's what bothers me most. How are you going to kill somebody like that,
Yeah.
Somebody so, good at heart. Who never did nothing to hurt nobody. But actually gave people inspiration to get through a tough day. You know what I'm saying? Giving them his gift so they can make it through to the next day. That's how powerful his music was and Tupac's music was to people. That's how much they cherished it. And whoever did whatever they did to him, they took that away from all of us. That is now gone. I mean, we'll still hear the old songs, of course, but I'm saying that, you know, he had much more to do. Okay? He had a lot more to do, and that's not, you know, ever going to happen. And it's really sad, too.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you taking time today to talk about this. And
yeah, absolutely.
You know,
always represent for Johnny J. Always, all day long, 24/7, till the day that I die. You know, the opportunity that he gave me, I'll never forget it. I'll never forget him. And as I said, I'll always represent him till the day I die. And that's just the way it is, and it'll never change. And that's the type of dude Johnny was as well. You know, I wish all the fans would have got to know him. You know.
Yeah.
I mean, they hear his beats and stuff and all that stuff. That's cool, but until you actually get to meet the guy and actually talk to him and have a conversation with him, you start to understand why those beats were that way, because of his upbringing and whatever, etc. else. But you know, in closing and all the statements, I'll just say that I just wish that everybody would have had that opportunity, because they all would have been treated the same way, and he appreciated all of his fans.
Well, too many lives were lost over all this bullshit, and we're missing out on a lot of great music that we all could have enjoyed, and we're missing out on some great human beings.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely, man.
All right, brother. We'll leave it there. Thank you so much, and we'll catch up soon.
Sounds good, bro.
All right. Have a great night.
All right, Mike. Thanks.
Bye now.